ready? Yes?
Yes.
All right. My name is Michael Zaja. I am the coordinator for off-campus, non-traditional, and parent services in the Dean of Students office here at Illinois State University. And we do these apartment hunting 101 sessions typically right before open leasing. So before we get into the presentation, I'll let these folks introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the presentation. At any time, if you all have questions, just ask them. This is not in any way, shape, or form formal. We typically have this in a PowerPoint presentation, but this room doesn't set up well for that. So that's why I gave you guys the handouts. So hopefully you all will take notes. You guys should also have pens to be able to take notes with. So take lots of notes. If you have questions, that type of thing, just let us know, and we'll be happy to answer them for you. So I'll let those guys introduce themselves.
Hi guys, I'm Taylor. I'm currently the intern for the students training here on campus, and that's pretty much it. That's as exciting as I get.
And I'm the student's attorney. I'm Ed. McKibben.
There we go. All right, so how many of you are actually stressed about apartment hunting if you raise your hand? Okay. So those of you who are not stressed, why are you here?
To learn our rights.
What's that?
To learn our rights.
To learn your rights? Why else? Those of you who are stressed, why are you here?
Free pen.
What's that? Free pen. Cool. Why else are you here?
I don't know what I'm doing.
What's that?
To not make mistakes.
To not make mistakes. Okay, that's good. How many of you feel as though you have to sign right away? Raise your hand. And please raise your leg up. There we go. So nearly everybody. Okay. How many of you are aware that there are actually more apartments than there are students? Just a couple of you. And I see several perplexed looks on people's faces. There are more apartments in the town of Normal than there are students. It's important to know that, because I can tell you, I've been doing this for 5 years, so this is my 5th leasing season, and what I can tell you, what I can share with you is that if you do your due diligence, you take some time, you do some research, understand the terms and conditions of your lease, feel comfortable with the roommates, you can afford the apartment, you're probably going to be fine. Okay? So one of the things I want to set for you all in this conversation tonight is that we are giving you worst case scenario. It's imperative that you remember that, because 95% of our students don't experience really hardly any problems. But 95% of our students don't prepare for problems either. So it's usually after the situation happens, then they come to us and say, fix it. Well, what we're trying to do is be proactive, make you aware of terms and conditions of leases, to know how to search for an apartment, and play the what if game, okay? So if we forget something or miss something in the what if game, please bring it up, okay? But what I don't want you to do is walk out of here more stressed than when you walked in, okay? So this is worst case scenario, all right? So the first thing we're going to talk about is searching for an apartment. What do you do? How do you do it? Anybody have any ideas?
Look online.
Where do you look online at?
At different realtors, like different websites.
Okay. Different property management websites. Where else do you look? Everybody look at your stress balls. There's something called the Off-Campus Housing Database. That's another place to look. And on your handout, there's the direct link to the database available to you, okay? That database contains vacant listings, contains roommate information, subleasing information, a whole host of information that will be helpful to you. Another thing I recommend that you all do, September 29th, from 11 to 3, in the Brown Ballroom, attend the housing fair. It's the 5th annual housing fair. We'll have 6 property management companies there. You'll be able to ask them questions, find out what they have to offer, and also schedule appointments to view their apartments. And guess what? No leases are to be signed during the housing fair, so there's no pressure. It's a great way to see what's available. So I really encourage you to attend the housing fair. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes to come through the fair, but you contain a lot of valuable information. The student's attorney will be there, Student Government Association will be there, campus dining will also be there. So you'll have a lot of good information to be able to obtain as it relates to living off campus. Do not feel obligated to sign a lease, okay, when you're searching. Here's what's going to happen. If you look between that, do you guys know when open leasing begins, by the way?
29.
Okay, who set the open leasing date to the 29th? Only 3 companies. The 3 largest companies. Everybody else has basically already started open leasing. Okay? And you guys start to look at yourself, oh my God, does that mean all the apartments are going to be gone? What? No, they're not. Here's how this works. I know you guys are probably aware that people line up, right? Sleep overnight. I think I've seen some ads in the Vidette where people say camp out and okay. Here's what's happening with that. Those apartments, those students that are lining up are looking for specific apartments, luxury apartments, and or specific houses. So if you don't fall into any of those categories, you'll have no problem finding an apartment. But if your mindset is, I want this specific apartment at this specific location and no other, then you're probably going to camp out in hopes to get it. If that's not the case, if you're willing to look around, if you're willing to find a perfectly good apartment, but take your time and research and compare and contrast, review terms and conditions, amenities, location, safety, all of those type of issues, then you're in a much better spot than if you're lining up. Now, if you're lining up but you've done your homework, that's fine. Sign the lease if you feel comfortable. Our responsibility to you is to make you an educated consumer. That's our sole responsibility. Your responsibility is to sign the lease when you feel most comfortable. But the thing to know is there are a number of factors that should help you make a decision on whether or not you're comfortable, and that's part of what we're going to review today, okay? How many of you thought about speaking to the current residents of a place that you're thinking about living in? How many would you, raise your hand if you could just, okay. What kind of conversation would you have with that person?
Are you happy with it?
Okay, are you happy with it?
Have you had any problems?
What type of problems are you talking about?
Like with the realty or like maintenance problems?
There you go. Have you had any maintenance issues? What about safety? And if you've had maintenance issues, how quickly do they respond? Those are some of the questions you want to ask those current tenants. Do you like your apartment? Do you like the location? Do you feel like the cost is worth what you're really paying for it? You know, when you talk about the bills and the utilities and, I mean, a whole host of factors. Now, it's harder to talk about the whole roommate thing, you know, the people that live next to you, because typically there's going to be a new set of people. But you can try to figure out the tone and tenor of that building by talking to tenants as well. Do you guys know where the party places are? Most of you will shake your heads yes, it's okay. You're not going to get in trouble if you know where the party places are. Do you know where the more studious places are? Because guess what? There are lots of those places as well. So depending on what kind of category you want to fit in, whether it be social or studious or somewhere in the middle, that should also dictate where you live. How many of you thought about where your apartment is in conjunction with where your classes are? Good. That is great to see that you guys are doing that. A lot of students forget about that. Especially, they just go, you know what, I want the location closest to the Bone, or I want the location, and then you forget that, well, I've got classes in Schrader, or the College of Business, or DeGarmo, and you're like, oh man, that's an extra 5-minute walk. And some of you all who are healthy and don't mind the walk, that's great, but when it's 10 below in the middle of winter, I can tell you, you're going to be pretty ticked the whole way, because we've dealt with that before. So, think about that type of thing, okay? Now you're in the process of looking. Now you're looking for the vacant listings. You say, okay, I've located a couple places. I've scheduled a few showings. I check them out. Now you walk into the apartment complex, or you walk into the property management complex, and they say, all right, here's the lease, sign it. What do? See, the silence is where our responsibility to you is, okay? What they're gonna say is, what they typically say is this: there's a person right behind you who's ready to sign. You have to be willing to walk away if you're not ready to sign, and if you don't understand the terms and conditions. An example I can give you. I am an impulse buyer when it comes to cars. I love fast cars. I'll own that. There was a car that came out about 3 years ago that it's like I need to have. But before I did my research. Because I knew I was going to impulse buy if I went there and I drove it and I liked it. So what happened? I did my research, I found the best price, best location, everything. I went, sure enough, I traded in my old car and I bought that car. But I felt comfortable with it because I researched ahead of time. That's all we're asking of you guys to do. Research and feel comfortable. Because if you do that, you're much more likely to say, okay, I like the apartment that I had signed for. You don't have to sign, there's a seat over here.
Thank you. Sorry.
No problem. So if you don't understand the terms and conditions, where should you go to help have somebody explain that to you? Oh, come on, this is... There we go. Come to off-campus student services, student's attorney, student's intern, student's attorney's intern. Any of us are there to help you understand the terms and conditions. Okay? Now here's some important items of note. Do you guys understand the difference between an individual and joint lease?
Yes.
Yes and no? Okay. Here's how this works. I'm going to explain the joint lease in the easiest terms I know. 4 of you decide to live together. Okay? You all sign the same lease. You all agree to the terms and conditions. And it costs a certain amount of money per month. One of you leaves. The other 3 people who are left are required to pay the difference of that 4th person who left. If you can't pay it, you get sued. So does the 4th person. There's basically only 2 ways that you get out of a lease in this town. Die, or the building's condemned. Okay? The only other way possible is through subleasing, but subleasing is not the easiest process and it does not release you from the lease. So consider the differences between a joint and individual lease. Most companies use a joint lease. However, there are some companies that use individual leases. So ask that question, am I signing a joint or individual lease? If you have roommates, make sure you feel comfortable and you know that they're going to be there through the entire 12-month lease. Right of entry. Does everybody know what right of entry means? Okay, in the lease, it'll stipulate that the landlord can come into the apartment at any reasonable time to show it, and it could be landlord or maintenance person to fix a problem, okay, for any reasonable, or during any reasonable time. Define for me what's reasonable. Okay, once again, the silence tells you there is no true definition. And here's what this means. Is 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning reasonable? For a lot of people, no. Guess what? For a maintenance person, yes. And this really affects women, okay?